You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Thanks everybody. Back again here at Healing Voices Project. I have an old friend, somebody I've known for 20 plus years now, Tracy McManmon. And Tracy runs Hilltown Behavioral Health and Substance Abuse Services at the Healing Hearts Sanctuary in Worthington, Massachusetts. Done this now for a couple of years, and now he's grown with 12 or 13 people practicing with him in a few different locations. Pittsfield, Mass, and Northampton, Mass. And Tracy, thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Sure. Now, you've been in this field for a little while, and I've been up to your place at the Healing Hearts Sanctuary in Worthington. It's beautiful up there.
Yeah, it's really a place of sanctuary.
Yep.
And the place was, I developed Hilltown Behavioral Health during COVID. And so the sanctuary, as you know, is surrounded in nature.
Yes.
And it sits on a little over 20 acres.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really this intimacy that I have and was experiencing with nature that really allowed me to sort of deepen my practice and develop Hilltown Behavioral Health.
Mm-hmm. Well, I could see that, because even just driving up there takes about a little while, from Springfield anyway. And but as you do, you just get the sense of peace as you're approaching it. And then when you pull in, it's quite beautiful, and it really does have a calming effect, I think, even just pulling up. So I think right there, it's just a gorgeous setting. And I know on your website, you've got some beautiful pictures of the entire place. It's beautiful.
Thank you. And yeah, the sanctuary, and there's, just this, the land, the space, nature, and then we have several different kinds of animals. And we also do equine assisted psychotherapy. So I have a practitioner here that provides that specific service. And I just also wanted to say that the land that I reside on is, my understanding, is also Nipmuc people. So just want to sort of acknowledge that.
What is I don't know what that is. Nipmuc people.
So that is indigenous people, and those are Native Americans that sort of reside in this territory of Western Mass. I'd say Ashfield and into Worthington, and I'm still learning that as well, but I just wanted to acknowledge.
I'm glad you brought that up. I didn't know that at all. Yeah, an hour away from here, and I say here because I'm in the Springfield area. That's interesting. Well, again, you have that's in Worthington, and you have a location in Northampton and also in Pittsfield, and you've grown. Now, you started off with yourself during COVID. Is that it?
Yeah, I started off as a solo practitioner,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd say probably a couple years in, I decided, or I would say organically, I developed this group collective practice. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the people working in the practice are people that I have history with, people that I've worked with, and yeah, again, the sanctuary in of itself really became this gravitational pull that really created the space that brought in really gifted practitioners to the practice.
Mm-hmm. hmm Um, well, that's great. Well, it's certainly in a couple short years, and we're going to talk more about Hilltown Behavioral Health and your program. But before we get there, why don't we give a little background on you? What brought you to where you are? And what was your path that led you? Now, when I first met you 20 years ago, you were a city dweller, and so you've sort of migrated into that sanctuary setting. And do you miss the city?
Yeah, there's times where like all of the conveniences that the city offers,
hmm
sometimes I miss.
Yeah, yeah.
And just that
But would
sense
you
of
trade it now?
yeah, I love being in nature,
Yeah,
and there's so much more that this environment offers.
yeah,
And then I can
yeah.
just travel into Northampton, I can travel into Pittsfield, so I'm sort of in between both places.
Okay, yeah. It's a bit quieter out there, that's for sure. Uh, but let's go back because you were your path. I mean, again, when I mentioned 20 years ago, you were not in this field at all. So what led you your personal path to get you where you are now into this into your practice?
Yeah, so in the early 90s, I was working in a detox, and I would say, I was sort of supportive. I just helped out within the detox. And at that time, I think we were called um, orderlies, nursing aides. And in that time, I just realized there was something within that environment, something within that field that really, really deeply resonated. And
hmm
while I was there at that time, you could move into counseling without having um, a certain education, without having credentials. And that was, geez, I don't know, 30 years ago or so.
hmm
So that was sort of my beginning into the field of substance abuse, mental health. And I think during that time is also when AIDS was going on. So it was a very um, meaningful, purposeful time in our history. But that experience really was sort of my segue into the field. And then after that, I stayed within, at that point, I was in my early 20s, and I really needed to explore more. Um, so I moved into human services
hmm
and started working with like marginalized, underserved communities. I started working with homeless. I started doing, yeah, just a lot of, yeah, serving communities that were um, really underserved, um, having a lack of opportunity and access. So I've been in human services for around 30 something years.
hmm
And I am also in recovery myself.
hmm
And I do disclose that. And when it naturally sort of, um, when the opportunity appears. So I have my own personal journey in recovery. And I think that maybe gives me a different sort of perspective when I'm
hmm
sitting with others who may be challenging or who may have maybe certain challenges or maybe exploring recovery. So my personal practice is supporting those who may be exploring recovery.
And certainly you have the relatability, the understanding that a lot of people who aren't in recovery would have. And again, you mentioned the challenges that people go through, which I'm sure you've gone through many of yourself. Um, and I'll ask you this, Tracy, how long have you been in recovery? Meaning, how long have you been um, um, sober without substance use?
It's been, I'd say, yeah, 15 years.
15 years, yeah.
And so I have my own personal relationship with recovery and developed my own perspective. And I always try to be mindful of that each person's experience and story is different. And so when I work with people, I meet with people, I really try to help others really find their own path, their own truth as it relates to where they want to be in their life, as it relates to if they're exploring recovery, sobriety, what is it that they need to find their own sort of truth,
Mm-hmm.
what aligns, with their spirit.
Mm-hmm. And you're right, everybody is different, and every path to get there is, and it's never, besides it never being the same, the challenges are always different because there are so many individualized challenges, context to their lives, their own history, things they've experienced that makes it more difficult, more challenging for everybody. And the fact that you take this holistic approach and consider all of these things, you don't have an expectation that this is just going to people are just going to show up and walk out recovered. Obviously. Um, Now, you are you've been continuing your education now. Now you're going for your doctorate, correct?
Yeah, so yes, I'm working on my PhD and I'm going so that my program of study is in transformative
Mhm.
studies, and I'm attending the California Institute of Integral Studies. And what I love about this program is that I was able to really design the area of my focus. So this is a research um, program, like as PhD, degrees are.
Mhm.
And so my program really looks at um, exploring current research and maybe expanding um, current research. That's sort of the intention, is looking at what's been done and some ways that I can now contribute to the field. And I'm looking at decolonizing mental health practices.
Can you want to explain what that means? I think because I'm not sure I understand it exactly. So I don't know if anybody listening to this. Talking about decolonizing behavioral health practices. What does that mean?
So when I started this program, it's sort of um, it's sort of been something that's been under construction. And this is not what I started out with, but so within my field, I just notice a certain sort of frame of working,
Mhm.
and the agencies, institutions that I have worked in had a certain sort of hold, a certain sort of perspective, a certain sort of leaning in on the work of mental health. And it's been from this European dominant um, sort of driven culture. And I specifically am interested in um, how genocide of indigenous people have really fueled and shaped our Western psychology medical model of care. So I'm looking at how do we sort of deconstruct this practice within
Mhm.
our model and really tend to um, our souls.
Hmm. And not just indigenous people, others as well, other groups too, or are you focusing on indigenous people?
That's really the roots of where sort of my research begins,
Hmm.
and just really looking at that. So that's really a focal point
Okay.
in my specific research.
Um, not to shift, but you did say something earlier that I want to ask you about too, because you said you have on the Healing Heart Sanctuary, you have lots of animals, goats, and you said you have equine assisted therapy. Talk about how that works.
Yeah, um, so each practitioner in the group has their own way of practice, their own sort of approach, their own perspectives, their own skills that they bring toward the work. And one of the practitioners that we have in the practice specializes in equine um, assisted psychotherapy. So that really is um, sort of bringing in horses
Hmm.
as a part of assisting aspects of the therapy. So it's really looking at how the relationship um, sort of supports whatever it is that the individual is um, in real time um, developing and emerging in relation to the horse. So if somebody's coming in with anxiety or whatever it is that um, they're needing sort of support around, they get to use that um, experience to see um, yeah, ways of sort of addressing um, and sort of moving through whatever it is that a person may be currently feeling um, sort of stuck
Hmm.
or um, feeling just sort of heavy with.
And you find this is an effective therapy, which people aren't typically accustomed to, right?
Yeah, so the nice thing about the practice is that we really look at, where each person's at. It's sort of so during our intake, we look at their history, whether they've been in therapy in the past, what's worked, what hasn't worked, um, and just seeing what um, may be different moving forward for them. So yeah, and
Hmm.
just being on the sanctuary, um, it's so non-office like. Like we may just go for a walk, we may go
Yeah.
for a hike, we may sit out in nature by the pond. Um,
Which brings up a point. Yeah, and again, having been there, I've seen that, and I gotta tell you that the calming effect, just approaching and walking in. Um, I wouldn't say walking in, walking out, because you're outside and it's beautiful. But when you're there, it is certainly about as far from a clinical setting as you can find. This isn't just come into the office, pull up a few chairs, and sit next to the file cabinet kind of a thing. This is different. And when you offer, well, I was going to ask if you would offer individual therapy. Do you also do group therapy?
we do group uh, practice, and
Okay.
so I think yeah, sometimes we may offer like a recovery oriented group. Right now, I'm exploring offering a group for people in recovery using art. So we do group work.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have the meetings outside again, and sometimes your therapy sessions, whether they're individual or group, could be outside, like I said, taking a walk through the woods. It's you take a different approach more holistic with nature. Um, and and that seems to be very effective. Did you find that?
I do. Yeah, I think nature really provides this natural understanding of whatever is yeah, I think I'm probably overthinking a little bit
Well,
right now.
I'm just thinking that too because it has its a natural calming effect when you're out, especially it's again. And I mean, I haven't been there again, but also on your website, I see these pictures are just gorgeous, and it's just so inviting. And so I would think that you're certainly setting the the mood and relieving tension just by virtue of being immersed in the nature. That in itself, I think, would advance the therapy along quite a bit.
Yeah, and so each practitioner meets people in different places. So we have some therapists that are meeting people in person in our Northampton location. I personally do a lot of work here. I mean, out at the sanctuary in nature. We have other therapists that come to the sanctuary to utilize the space. So, nature reflects our inner nature. So being in this kind of environment organically allows people to see their own strengths, their own capacity, their own truth. And I think as a culture, we're sort of conditioned in believing that we don't have what's needed to arrive. We don't have, just don't have what we need. And there's this belief that we need to be fixed. So nature is this beautiful parallel that allows us to see our gifts. So this setting for me just allows me to work with people and to meet people in just this, beautiful natural setting that allows people to just really get grounded
Mhm,
and to really sort of dissolve all of those things that sort of obstruct our truth.
mhm.
And it takes time.
It takes time and it takes patience. And we were talking earlier of patience on both parts, both the therapist and the person who's seeking treatment, because sometimes people will expect instant gratification. It doesn't always happen that way, does it?
No, I think that, um, so I think, people come in not knowing what therapy is. People come in not, or maybe there's a certain sort of expectation or a certain understanding. And the way that I work with individuals is the way that I work with individuals, which may be very different from other therapists. And that the way that I work with people is helping them to see that um, we all have our gifts. We all have the tools that are needed to get where we want to be, and that we can also use the support of our community, the support of others to help us in that journey, and that we don't have to do this alone.
Hmm.
But I think as a culture that there's this sense of we don't have what's needed, and we have this sort of conditioning that we don't have enough. And how does that sort of conditioning impact our sense of self, our sense of confidence? How does it impact the way that we perceive and move in the world? So just really, so nature is this beautiful, organic clearing away, allowing us to see um, what we have at our
Hmm.
core. what we have within our sort of our core.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and and it's, for lack of a better word, I think when people are wrapped up, I think of a distraction, right? And again, it's more than that. But if you're enveloped with all the things around you, life, challenges, people, jobs, stress, money, the noises of the city, and you go out to a place like the Healing Heart Sanctuary, and and you've got animals and you've got nature, you hear the sounds you don't normally sound. It's different sensory experience. And I think that awakens something different in your mind. I would think that, because, and we all experience, we get away, got to get away from the city, got to get away from the noise, got to get away from my job, and you take a walk in the woods and you just feel different. And this takes it to a different level, you know. You brought up something earlier, not to switch, but it made me think, because I think it was a great analogy. When you and I were first tuning in here, and it was my fault, I could not get my video to work. And you were patiently waiting, and I could see you. And my video kept saying, "Oh, your camera's being used by another." I said, "What is going on?" And I started to get a little impatient with it, and I started to work through it. And um, finally, I got the camera to go, and you were patient. And then once I got the camera to go, the audio didn't work. And then that was bugging me. And I'm starting to get, oh, should I just give up? Should we reschedule? And then as we did that, finally, um, something froze. And I'm like, it's one thing after another. And 15 minutes into this, I give you credit, because you were just like, okay, well, we're good. We're good. And as we finally went through this, and finally got it to work, you made a great analogy. I said, this is kind of like what we experience in our sessions and our therapy when people have challenges, and you can clarify this if I don't get it quite right the way you put it so articulately earlier. Is saying you work through these challenges, be patient with some of these things, because it's very easy to give up. You have the tools, we have the tools. It was going to work if we just had the patience. I came this close to giving up, and it was your patience that made me say, no, okay, I can do this. Had you simply said, yeah, Mike, if this isn't working, I would have just given me the green light to say, all right, let's reschedule. And I would have given up in frustration, and that would have been it. And then you said afterwards, this is reflective of often what we experience during therapy, during recovery, is having the patience to see through it, through the tools, with the tools that we have, and being able to see it. Did I capture that, or did you want to elaborate on that? Because I thought it was an excellent analogy.
No, that was really well
Mhm.
said. And I think that when we allow sort of experiences that we're in, sort of in each moment to deepen sort of our ways of showing up, our ways of staying grounded, our ways of really just bringing more mindfulness and intentionality into our lives. It creates this beautiful, rich experience of using those things as an opportunity to sort of evolve. And that, yeah, this experience we had, it just really reminded me of what happens um, a lot in therapeutic environments, that it's not just what sort of comes up for the individual that I'm working with, it also what comes up for me, that I am sort of looking at my own insecurity. I'm looking at my own sort of the way that I lean in, the way that I approach, all of those things that may be activated within me that allow me to sort of discern, and that these sort of experiences become my mentor, my teacher, and that if I can sort of help people to use these experiences as opportunities to deepen and to get grounded, it's just a beautiful, beautiful opportunity. And that when we can sort of see our life in these experiences as a way of like this experiential practice, it changes our perspective. And we only need um, just a little shift, one
Mhm.
little shift. And maybe we do this through awareness as we are in this moment, that when something we're going through allows us an opportunity to engage and to deepen our perspective, it's really rich. I don't know if
Mhm.
that sort of defined.
No, and I think in having the term that keeps coming up is having the patience to see this through. And again, we're all trained that we want instant gratification. It doesn't come that way. And having that patience to work through, to understand the process. So, in going into that, I wanted to ask you, in fact, let's mention, I mean, the phone number, if somebody wanted to reach you, the phone number for Hilltown Behavioral Health. Actually, Tracy, why don't you shout out the phone number?
Yeah, so if people want to reach out to us, our number
Mhm.
is 413-854-7096.
Okay. And it's Hilltown Behavioral Health. That is, you can certainly Google that, and it's
Yeah,
located in Worthington, Massachusetts.
yes.
Um, but
And
let's go into if somebody were to call you and say, "Hello," what do they expect? What happens after the phone call?
yeah, so when someone calls, there's usually an initial screening that
Hmm.
allows me to see what someone may be needing.
Hmm.
And then I start thinking about practitioners in the group who may have availability and may have a certain sort of modality or approach to the work that the client is resonating with. So
Hmm.
a lot of times people have already gone onto our website, they've looked at practitioners' profiles, maybe something resonates. And so that sometimes is a way in which people start talking about what resonates. And um, yeah, so usually it's a brief screening, looking at what someone is needing. And so once we move through that phase, I will then introduce them to a therapist within the practice, and then that therapist provides a consultation. And then the two of them will look at um, if working together really resonates for the client. And the client is really, um, just really supported around making a very informed decision,
Hmm.
and that they can consult with several therapists within the practice.
Hmm.
And if for some reason that maybe there's no one in the practice that resonates with them, I will help them find someone within the larger community that may resonate with them.
Okay. So even if they're not sure that aligns quite with what you do, they want to learn more about Hilltown Behavioral Health. They want to learn more about an opportunity. Either way, you'd be happy to talk with them
Yes,
and try to identify the right path.
yes.
Yeah, even if it's not necessarily with you. Um, and how about your hours of availability? Um, and is it flexible? Is it Monday through Friday? How does it work?
Yeah, so it's really, each therapist has their own hours,
Hmm.
and we always look at meeting scheduling needs of people we provide support and services to.
Hmm.
So um, yeah, so we can meet during, Monday through Friday. We have weekend hours as well. So it really depends on what a client, um, what an individual is needing, and the availability of the therapist.
Okay. And also, besides being in person, you also offer online um, therapy as well.
We do. Yes.
Yeah. So they don't always have to be on site, but
And I just
certainly,
wanted to, yeah, and I
yeah.
just wanted to say that I don't have a Pittsfield site yet,
Okay.
but I am looking at securing an office. Um, right now, it looks like we should have a place by March in Pittsfield.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's good. And so, but even though if somebody is in Pittsfield, they can certainly drive out to Worthington or Northampton or do it online.
Yes.
So there is availability that way until you have your physical location.
So
Okay.
we I'm licensed in Massachusetts,
Hmm.
and then that we're also able to do telehealth in the state of Vermont as well.
Okay, that's good to know. Vermont's not that far.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Um, well, you've got a very interesting practice, Tracy, and you've certainly grown. As you said, you have 12 or 13 others that practice with you, and in the future, especially opening during COVID. I mean, that was a challenge in itself, which is another story, but you emerged through that stronger, like many of us have, right?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, well, it's been great talking. There's a lot to learn here. And could you just tell it again? It's Hilltown Behavioral Health, but is there a website or how would people reach you besides calling the phone number?
Yeah, so we do have a website, which is Hilltown Behavioral Health and Substance Abuse Services at Healing Hearts Sanctuary. So if you just Google out that, you'll be able to find us.
Hmm. And again, the phone number is 413-854-7096. And we're talking with Tracy McManmon at Hilltown Behavioral Health. Tracy, before we wrap up, is there anything that we forgot to talk about, or did we cover pretty much everything?
I think we had a nice range of territory
Yeah.
we went through.
I just didn't want to forget something. Well, that's great because I learned something, and I'm going to go back on your website because there's a lot I didn't get to cover, but I think really it certainly is, as it's mentioned, a place for healing, understanding, potential, and connection on your website, and I think it's a gorgeous location, and certainly it's worth if you have any questions about Tracy's practice, um, give Tracy a call. As you could just hear Tracy's got a very deep understanding, and I think that's something that certainly can be beneficial to people who are going through these types of challenges. Well, Tracy, thanks.
Thank
I
you.
know it took a while for us to get here, and and thanks for your patience earlier too. So um, thanks, and we'll be talking real soon. And everybody, thanks for listening. See you real soon. Thanks.
Okay.